Morning everyone, we're out here in the chicken coop, kind of getting the chickens situated. Got the lights turned on for them. Got some water out here for them. And actually today happens to be the day we go pick up our weekly gallon of milk. So that's what we're doing next. Made it back to the cabin. We're gonna make a cup of coffee real quick and we're gonna make some breakfast. We're gonna make some omelets. Got some moose sausage going over there. We're gonna do red onion, some dehydrated tomatoes, and some bell pepper. We were lucky enough to get some fresh cream for the coffee. So look at, we got this nice thick cream. Oh my gosh.
It's so puffy.
I know.
Like a dream.
Put a little milk in those eggs, it makes a difference.
Bluff. Now that Eric and I have ate breakfast, we are going to feed breakfast to our chickens, and we're out in our conics making some of their food up. We buy the grains usually separate and then we mix them up in this barrel we have here. I've already started. I have a few more things to add and then I'm going to mix it all up. We've been feeding our chickens the same thing for about 2 years, and I know I've mentioned it before, but it has been a while. I was just going to mention again what ingredients go into our chicken feed. I've already got barley, oats, and peas in the bin. And I'm going to add some sunflower seeds. Those are the 4 main ingredients we use in our feed in the summer, but I do add some corn and some red wheat in the winter. And because we've been mixing our feed like this for several years, I have a pretty good idea of what proportions I'm doing to get them at the right amount of protein. This is an awesome bag of feed because it comes with a 50-50 ratio of the red winter wheat and the corn, the cracked corn. So it's great for them for the winter. I only give them corn in the winter. I don't give it to them in the summer. They don't need it. And the wheat is extra protein for them, and I find that they don't eat it in the summer. So again, we really only give those 2 extra ingredients to them in the winter months. So this usually takes a few minutes to get it nice and thoroughly mixed. All of the ingredients in here are important for our chickens and for their health, but the sunflower seeds, the wheat, and the peas actually have the most protein. So those are the things that I'm kind of calculating in how much I want of certain things. The other stuff is more just like a filler. And in fact, it's really interesting when you feed your chickens this way, you'll see if they're not getting enough of something, because you'll see they'll pick out that specific item in here. So sometimes they don't have enough sunflower seeds and I'll add that back or add some more of that in. We found that when feeding chickens peas, we always like to get them milled or crushed, because in the whole form, they do eat them, but our chickens only eat them soaked. So in the summer, we ferment our food, we soak it for a few days and feed it to them. It's a really good way to stretch their food. But in the winter, because everything freezes, we have just found that it's not practical to do that. For a while, we would bring the feed in the house and soak it that way. But what we've resorted to is just feeding them dry food now in the winter months. We are going to bring this over to the chickens. We have a lot of feeders throughout here because we have 35 chickens. They've got some fresh water. We have to fill it up a few times a day because it does freeze if it's this cold. So we are going into our 3rd winter here in Alaska, but only our 2nd year with our chickens and this coop. We figured we'd just give a little update and tell you guys how they've been doing here. The coop is a 10 by 10, and we have some big open windows on the front that really never get shut up, and that's definitely intentional. It's kind of like an open airflow coop design, and that's because when you close up a coop, a lot of the chicken's droppings has a lot of moisture and ammonia, and you can get a really potent, unhealthy environment for chickens fast. We wanted a well-ventilated coop so we could mitigate those problems, and it also helps prevent frostbite. This design has been working really well for us, and only on occasion, if it is super windy and there's snow blowing in, do we close, the front windows or the front shutters for the chickens. We added this second overhang this year, and I love it. This whole area would get covered with snow last winter, but this year the chickens have been using it as another area to hang out. They basically have 4 areas to hang out. This area, they have a partially enclosed shelter on the other side, a lean-to. They have their coop, and since their coop is raised, they also have the entire underneath area of the coop, and that we have found is just wonderful for them. It's a bunch of room for them in the winter, even when there is a bunch of snow. This whole area is the rest of their run, and our chickens don't really like to venture out into the snow. I mean, they will sometimes go out on it, but for the most part, they stay away from it. 2 of our most common questions for keeping our chickens in Alaska is, do they get cold, and do you heat your chicken coop? Or better yet, why don't you heat your chicken coop? We don't heat the chicken coop for several reasons, and we've kept chickens for several years. Like I said, again, this is the 2nd winter for these chickens. They can tolerate living in Alaska without a heat lamp where we're at. So in our zone, they can do it. They live, they survive. It's not just that why we don't heat. There's also some safety concerns with straw, and primarily we have a small solar setup. So it's just not realistic to run a heat bulb in here for them. And one of my biggest personal reasons is because our chickens are very adapted to the cold. They were born out here as chicks, and they're very used to the cold. So if you get them really acclimated to warm weather, they're not as likely going to go out in the colder weather. And these chickens do great in the winter. They actually go out in -10. Sometimes they just chill out a little more around here, but for the most part, they're fairly active in the winter. We have found that they are not immune, though, to extremely frigid temperatures. If it's like -teens, they usually chill in their coop. We had a stretch last January where it was like -20s for several weeks, and they pretty much just hung out in their coop that entire time, and that's why we have such a big coop. We open up the door so they can go in and out, but they prefer to stay in the coop because it was so cold outside. We're gonna come around to this side of the coop. So I already tapped into that first question, but the answer is truthfully, they do get cold. Like I said, they're not immune. They have feathers. They're not like me and you as far as our skin, so they can tolerate much colder temperatures than you and I can. You know, we have to wear clothes, and their feathers is like their clothes. The major thing that Eric and I have learned is when you keep chickens in this cold of temperatures, their large combs and even wattles are susceptible to frostbite. No matter how much you try to have an open coop or things like that, it can still happen just because they kind of have a large appendage. So what we have learned and decided is that we will always keep chickens with rose comb, or like a closer, I think they're called pea comb, but we won't keep like a single comb, that classic rooster with the really tall comb. In fact, one of our roosters in there is a rooster that had that comb the first winter, and he got frostbite extremely bad. He lost most of the comb, it healed, and I'm fairly certain he will never get frostbite again. And that's Spaz. He's all the way under there hanging out with the ladies. This is, we call him Ruru because he's our biggest rooster. He has a huge rose comb, and he did actually get a teeny tiny bit of frostbite last year on his wattles and his comb, but he is looking really good this year. We added on a third rooster this year that was hatched out, and he also has a really nice small comb. Made that choice deliberately because I just don't want to put them through that. So this is a pretty typical day for them. It's a little colder today, but they're still outside. Some of them are eating, scratching around. In fact, this is an area that they like to dust bathe a little bit. There's some loose dirt, but they do like to hang out up there and kind of huddle. And we have that area protected by some pallets and by some straw so they don't get wind underneath the coop. You can see there's a lot of hay and straw spread out. They really like just sifting through that and picking through it. Gives them something to do in the winter. And it's also a good way to protect their feet from being on the snow too long or getting frostbite, because sometimes snow does blow in here, and that's just like our covering for it. We're gonna head back to the coop to talk about how we manage it. All right, so things in here are fairly easy to manage because we don't really do much all winter. We will just spread some new straw on top of the droppings every once in a while. I'll spread some new straw in here, for them to hang out in, and it'll get pretty thick by springtime when everything melts, and that's when we'll actually pull it out. And we found that moisture and smell is just not really a problem when we do things that way. We went with 2x4s for the roost, and that's for their feet to lay flat, and then they push up with their body feathers. I think that also helps prevent frostbite on their feet. And we added a ladder this year. They seem to really like that, especially the Jersey Giants, the black chickens. It is a little hard for them to fly up, as well as our Icelandic chickens. I mentioned that the chickens dust bath outside. Well, they also dust bath inside. We have a dust bath area for them, and I fill it up. Right now it has a lot of rocks, but I filled it up earlier in the fall before we went into winter with sand, ash, and some soil. We also put DE, or diatomaceous earth, in there on occasion to help prevent mites and lice. We've never really had an issue with that here. One big thing about keeping chickens here is lighting. So depending upon where you are in Alaska, you're gonna receive less light. Some areas receive a lot less light or no sunlight. We get down to about 5 hours, a little, just over 5 hours. So that's not that much light for a chicken's body. They have to recognize it's getting, light out, come down, eat, drink, go to the bathroom, do all that, and then they get back up as soon as they start to sense that the sun's going down. So providing some form of light is pretty crucial to having a nice, healthy flock in the winter. And Eric's going to talk a little bit about our lighting in here.
The lighting with these chickens, it's not really constant. I basically just put out lights for them whenever I wake up in the morning. I usually get up about 6:30 in the morning, sometimes a little after 7, so I just put the lights out here and give them some fresh water as soon as I wake up. In the evening, we've kind of decided that we just stopped putting a light out here for them. We don't think it was really helping. They kind of just went to sleep anyway, so we're pretty much just doing it in the morning now. We have 3 main ways that we put the light out here in a coop. We have a flashlight, it's an O light, it's rechargeable, and it comes with this little lantern attachment. This is probably my favorite way of putting light out here. Just looks like that. I put it on medium mode. We also have a little light bulb that has a battery in there, and this is USB or solar rechargeable. This works pretty good. It's not as bright as the O light, but this definitely works good. And then something new this year that we didn't have the first year is I put a 12-volt battery out here. This is the battery we usually use on our electric fencing, but since we take it down in the winter, it's in here. And I just got some alligator clips. And if you follow the wires up top, we've just got some simple 12-volt lights. They work pretty well. They're not the brightest in the world, but it's definitely nice having those in here this year. And as soon as the sun starts to come up out here, which varies the time of year, but it was about 10 o'clock this morning, we come out here, we collect the lights, give them some more water, and it's about how we light our coop, and it actually works out pretty good for us.
The last part of our coop is their egg boxes, and I have to grab the eggs for today. It looks like we have 3. You're seeing a lot of other little white ones because those are wooden eggs. We have those to help increase the production. This year, about half of our chickens, or really closer to a third, are our original chickens, and the rest are all New Year chickens, so they're not even a year old. We had a period in the fall where our older chickens stopped laying. They went through a molt, and our newer ones were not laying yet, so we were getting really no eggs at all. But only a few weeks back, the first year chickens started laying, and they've been laying extremely well considering we only have 5 hours of light. I mean, the chickens themselves are probably getting 7 to 8 realistically, so that's really good in my opinion to come out here and get eggs. We're averaging, it varies a lot, anywhere from like 5 to 10 we can even get, so it just depends. It's definitely going to go up a lot in the spring with the amount of hens we have, but it is of course lower in the winter. And I did want to mention our Icelandics are not a very high production breed. If you're ever looking into them, they're definitely on the lower spectrum of how many eggs you're going to get, and that's because they're excellent moms, so they go broody. That is why we wanted them. They actually hatched out 35 little chicks earlier this year. They did a great job, took care of them out here and everything. We also have a few Jersey Giants, the big black chickens. Those are better layers, and our Jersey Giants aren't really laying right now either. Another thing we researched with the Icelandic chickens is their food consumption. They are extremely thrifty birds, so for how many birds we have, we really do not feed them a lot. We have had large flocks in the past, and we absolutely had to feed them more. You can tell the Icelandics have a smaller stature, so you know, they just don't eat as much. And I find that Jersey Giants need a lot more because they're a much bigger chicken. I clean the nesting boxes as needed and just add some more straw for them, or some, you know, pine shavings. I'm gonna grab the eggs and head inside. They're not yet frozen, but if you leave them out here long enough, they will actually crack and freeze. So you can tell that these are super new pullet eggs because they're really small. The Icelandics do lay bigger eggs than this, but this is what they look like when they first start. Today I'm also going to be making the chickens a warm treat. In the summertime they get fish, a lot of other scraps, and definitely a lot of veggie scraps. So we like to supplement them in the winter with like little treats every now and then just to keep their spirits up since it is so cold. Today I'm going to be using our sourdough starter. I'm going to be using the discard mainly, and adding some baking powder and adding a whole bunch of other stuff to make them a nice fluffy bread. I added some flour and water, and I'm going for like a thicker pancake texture for them. Other things we like to make are, you know, hot oats. Eric will make some hot oatmeal for them, and we'll also do kefir. Sometimes they really like that. I actually don't worry about feeding them the apple cider vinegar or the garlic that much in the winter months. Those are more my summer and spring routine for them, just because of their diet and eating things that possibly have worms in them. Once I get this in the pan, I'm going to be adding some cinnamon, oregano, and thyme. Other things I like to add is cayenne, but I do not have any. I've run out of it, so I need to buy some more. Alright, that looks super tasty. Definitely human quality here. I'm going to let that cool down once it's done, and then we're going to get it chopped up and bring it out to the chickens.